A millionaire caught a single father fixing her son's broken bicycle. Her reaction changed everything. Mornings in the small town began with the familiar scent of motor oil, steel, and strong black coffee. The rain had just stopped, leaving puddles on the ground reflecting the overcast sky and the soft, rhythmic drip of water still falling from the roof. In that gentle quiet, Daniel Walker stood in his small garage connected to his home, wiping grease-stained hands with an old rag. At 33, Daniel had grown used to this slow rhythm of life. 3 years ago, a sudden accident had taken his beloved wife, leaving him alone with their daughter Emily, who had only been 5 at the time. Since then, Daniel had been both father and mother. A simple man with a heart full of quiet scars, trying to mend it piece by piece with the love he had for his child. The garage door was slightly open, and a cool breeze slipped through. He looked out onto the narrow street outside, damp but peaceful. Nothing unusual about this Saturday morning, except for the sound of laughter coming from the neighbor's house, where Emily was playing with a group of kids. Daniel smiled at the sound. She looked so much like her mother, from her deep brown eyes to the soft smile that could light up any room. Emily had become the only bright light left in Daniel's world since that fateful day. He bent down to check his tools, a few wrenches that needed organizing, some spark plugs that needed cleaning. The small auto repair shop was something he had built himself after the tragedy. It wasn't just to make a living, but to be near Emily as much as possible. There weren't many customers, but it was enough to get by, and more importantly, enough to feel at peace. There were days when Daniel wondered, what if the accident hadn't happened? What would life have looked like? But he didn't allow himself to stay in those thoughts too long. Life moved on. He had Emily, and as long as she was happy, he would keep standing. The faint sound of a bicycle skidding on the wet pavement snapped him back to the present. He looked up to see a boy, maybe around 10 years old, struggling to push a chipped blue bike with its rear wheel twisted out of alignment. The boy stood just outside the garage, his face streaked with dried tears. Daniel squinted. A stranger, a child, a broken bike, and a heart that looked just a little too heavy for a Saturday morning. He didn't know it yet, but that small moment, that boy, that bike, was about to change his life in ways he never could have imagined. Daniel stepped out of the garage, still holding the worn rag in his hand. A breeze tousled his hair, but he didn't care. His eyes were fixed on the boy standing motionless at the edge of the driveway. The kid wore a baggy white t-shirt, simple shorts, and sneakers soaked from the wet pavement. His bike was chipped, with a loose chain and a crooked back wheel. But what caught Daniel's attention wasn't the bike. It was the boy's eyes, red and swollen, like he'd been crying. "Hey there, you okay?" Daniel asked gently, not pressing, using the same calm tone he used with Emily. The boy glanced at him, hesitant. "My bike, it's broken," the boy mumbled, barely audible. Daniel nodded, walking over and kneeling beside the bike. "Let's see here. Chain slipped and got tangled. Nothing serious. I can fix it." The boy watched every move Daniel made. Every time he removed a part, the boy would ask, "What's that for?" or "Why do you take that off?" Daniel smiled and answered each question, just like he always did with Emily. The air began to feel lighter. The boy's shoulders relaxed, his eyes less tense. Daniel noticed, but said nothing. He'd learned to read children's moods well over the past few years. There was something about this boy, a quiet sadness, a silent plea to be seen. "What's your name?" Daniel asked as he tightened the chain. "Noah," the boy replied simply. "Nice name. I'm Daniel. Nice to meet you, Noah." "Thanks for fixing my bike," Noah murmured. "No problem. It's all set now. Want to give it a try?" Daniel rolled the bike toward him. Noah hopped on and pedaled down the small street. When he returned, there was something on his face that hadn't been there before. A smile. Not a big one, but a real one. "Thanks, Daniel," No need to call me sir. Just Daniel is fine. Okay, thanks, Daniel. How much do I owe you? Daniel shook his head. You don't owe me anything. Just pop the chain back on. No big deal. Noah blinked, surprised. My mom says we shouldn't take things for free from strangers. She's right, Daniel said with a nod. But sometimes people do kind things just because they want to help. And you reminded me of someone. Do you have a son? No, I have a daughter. Her name's Emily. She's 8. Noah smiled, truly smiled this time. I'm 10. Maybe we can be friends. I think that would be great. Where do you live, Noah? Daniel asked. Noah pointed vaguely toward the other side of town. Kind of far. I was visiting a friend. Near here? Daniel caught the hesitation, but didn't push. Kids had their own reasons for being guarded. He respected that. Well, if your bike ever acts up again, you know where to find me. I'm always around. Noah nodded, got on his bike, and started pedaling away. After a few meters, he turned back and waved. Daniel stood there, watching the small figure disappear around the corner, the worn bike rattling slightly as it moved. Something stirred quietly in his chest. Something small, barely formed. He couldn't name it yet, but he knew that moment had meant something. The next morning, Daniel was preparing a simple lunch in the kitchen when a knock came at the door. Emily, playing in the living room, dashed over to open it before he could react. Her excited voice rang out, "Dad, someone's here to see you." Wiping his hands on a towel, Daniel stepped to the door. On the front porch stood Noah, the boy with the broken bike, alongside a woman he'd never seen before. She was tall, slender, with neatly tied blonde hair, dressed casually in jeans and a cream-colored blouse. But there was something about her that drew attention, a quiet poise, a kind of elegance she couldn't fully hide, even in simple clothes. "Hi," she said, voice gentle but confident. "I'm Rachel, Noah's mother. He told me you helped him with his bike yesterday. I wanted to thank you in person." Daniel shook her hand, a little surprised by her visit, but friendly nonetheless. It was nothing, just a small fix. Not small to Noah. Rachel glanced at her son, who stood quietly by her side. He'd been upset all day yesterday. When he came home, he smiled for the first time in weeks. That means a lot to me. Emily peeked out from behind the door, eyeing Noah with curiosity. "Hi," she said brightly, flashing a big smile. Noah blushed and mumbled a shy response. Rachel chuckled softly, watching them. "Looks like they'll get along just fine." "This is my daughter, Emily," Daniel said. "Lovely to meet you," Rachel said, bending slightly to speak to Emily, then turned back to Daniel. "I didn't want to intrude, just wanted to say thank you. I know you refused payment, but kindness like yours shouldn't go unnoticed." Daniel shook his head. "Sometimes helping someone is just the right thing to do. I've had people help me when I needed it most." Rachel paused for a moment, as if weighing her words. Her eyes drifted toward the garage behind Daniel. Then she asked, "Are you a mechanic?" "Yeah. I run a small shop from home so I can be around for Emily. It's not much, but it's enough." "Being a single father isn't easy," Rachel said quietly. Daniel was surprised she picked up on that, but nodded. "It's not, but she makes it worth it." Noah looked around, his eyes saying something he couldn't voice. Rachel noticed, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "We've had a tough few months," she said softly. "I think yesterday, thanks to you, Noah found a little piece of hope again." Daniel didn't know what to say. For a moment, differences in background, status, or history didn't matter. All that remained was a good man, a strong woman, and 2 children searching for something they didn't quite know how to name yet. Since that day, Noah started coming by more often. At first, he'd pass by under the excuse of checking the bike. Then it turned into sitting quietly, watching Daniel work, asking curious questions about engines, bolts, and oil. Daniel answered them all, patiently, as if he were talking to his own daughter. And then Noah started helping, wiping down tools, handing over wrenches, tidying up the garage after work. No one told him to. Daniel didn't stop him either. Emily was thrilled. She didn't have many friends around, so having Noah visit felt like a gift. The two of them would sit in the garage corner, munching on cookies while playing tic-tac-toe on an old toolbox lid. Rachel stopped by a few times too, always polite, but no longer distant. She'd bring coffee or homemade muffins, sometimes just linger for a few minutes, checking on Emily, watching Noah, exchanging a brief smile with Daniel before heading off. Over time, Daniel saw a different side of Rachel. She wasn't just a polished woman from some other world. She was a mother holding everything together for her son, hiding exhaustion behind bright eyes, choosing to listen more than she spoke. One afternoon, as Rachel stood near the garage watching Noah polish a bike frame, Daniel walked over. "He's good," Daniel said. "Careful, patient. I think he's got a knack for this." Rachel nodded, her eyes softening. "I haven't seen him connect with anyone like this since—" She trailed off. Daniel didn't press. After a pause, she continued. "After the divorce, Noah changed. He closed off, stopped talking much. I thought I was losing him." Daniel looked at her. "I know that feeling." Surprised, she asked, "You've been through something like that?" "Not the same," he replied. "But after my wife passed, Emily changed too. Some days she wouldn't speak to me, just stared at pictures of her mom and cried. I felt helpless." Rachel's eyes filled with quiet empathy. "So, what did you do?" "I didn't try to fix it right away. I stayed. I listened when she was ready. And I waited when she wasn't. Bit by bit, she came back." Rachel smiled, a real smile, gentle and honest. "Maybe Daniel doesn't just fix cars," she said softly. "Maybe you fix things a little more delicate, like trust." Daniel chuckled under his breath, but didn't deny it. In the late afternoon sun, surrounded by the scent of oil and the sound of children laughing, two people, from two different worlds, started truly seeing each other. No longer through hesitant glances, but with a quiet understanding that ran deeper than words. That afternoon, after Noah and Emily had gone off to play in the backyard, Rachel lingered longer than usual. The golden evening sun brushed across her face, highlighting a quiet weariness in her eyes that Daniel hadn't noticed before. She held a to-go coffee cup, though she wasn't drinking it. Daniel was wiping his hands after finishing a minor repair, glancing over at her with a soft smile. "Something on your mind?" he asked, his voice calm and low, the same tone he used when Emily was upset, but wouldn't say why. Rachel looked at him for a long moment before exhaling. "I think it's time I told you the truth." Daniel raised his eyebrows but said nothing, just waited. "I haven't been completely honest about my job," she began, locking eyes with him. "I'm not just a regular office worker like I said at first." Daniel nodded slightly, not surprised. "I figured there's something different about you. The way you carry yourself? I just didn't know what." Rachel gave a small, tired laugh. "I'm the CEO of a real estate company, Carter Developments. It's a family business." Daniel said nothing. He'd heard the name before. It was on signs across multiple buildings in the city. "And you're the one in charge?" he asked after a pause. Rachel nodded. "Yes. I've been running it since my father retired 3 years ago. And you chose not to tell me because I'm used to people treating me differently once they know." Rachel's tone wasn't defensive, just honest. "I'm tired of being judged by titles or net worth." Daniel nodded slowly. "I get that." Rachel studied him carefully. "Are you upset?" He shook his head. "No, I guess what bothers me isn't that you didn't tell me. It's that you felt like you couldn't." She froze. He wasn't angry, but his honesty cut deeper than accusation. "I'm sorry," she said sincerely. "I just felt safer being seen as a mom, a regular woman, not some heiress or whatever people think." Daniel nodded, his expression softening. "Well, now I know," he said quietly. "And you're still Rachel, Noah's mom, the woman who brought me muffins 3 times this week." She let out a light laugh, visibly relaxing. 4 times, if you count today." Daniel grinned. "See? You owe me another one." They looked at each other. A simple moment, but anything but light. In that silence, Rachel felt something she hadn't in a long time. Seen, just as she was. No labels, no roles. "Thanks for not shutting down," she said. "Thanks for telling me," he replied. And just like that, among motor oil, old wood, and the lingering scent of fresh-baked muffins, a fragile thread between them grew just a little stronger. After that afternoon, Daniel and Rachel began talking more. Not just about Noah, Emily, or bikes, but about things that lived deeper inside them. The conversations were short at first, but honest. One day, Rachel stood beside him in the garage, holding a warm cup of tea, and quietly asked, "Do you ever get tired of having to be strong all the time?" Daniel didn't look at her right away. He was tightening a bolt, but his hand paused. "Yeah, every single day." She smiled sadly. "I thought I was the only one." It turned out these two seemingly different people, one who lived simply, the other surrounded by skyscrapers and million-dollar contracts, shared something essential, a loneliness neither had dared to name. Daniel told her about the accident, the day he got the call that his wife had died, about trying to explain it to Emily when she kept asking, "Where's Mommy?" and having no words that wouldn't shatter her. Rachel shared the night she moved out of her old house, how Noah clung to his stuffed dog and didn't say a word, how people looked at her like a powerful, in-control woman when all she wanted was someone to ask, "Are you okay?" Old wounds, when shared, didn't feel so cold anymore. Instead, they became a thread between them, delicate, steady, slowly weaving something new. Still, they both knew, something was growing between them, something more than empathy, more than friendship. It was the comfort of presence, the way their eyes lingered a bit longer, the kind of silence that no longer felt awkward, but familiar. And with that closeness, new fears quietly slipped in. Daniel began to feel himself stepping into Rachel's world, a world he wasn't sure he belonged to. When she talked about board meetings, city development projects, or upcoming charity galas, he found himself pulling back. Not out of jealousy, but out of something harder to admit, a feeling of not being enough. Rachel, on the other hand, sensed the judgment in the eyes of friends and colleagues when they learned she'd been spending time at a small garage with a mechanic. She'd never cared about social expectations, but this time was different, because her heart was starting to lean toward that very man. They didn't talk about it, not yet. But in every glance, every accidental brush of the hand, the truth grew louder. They were falling, and they were both afraid. Afraid of getting hurt again. Afraid of stepping into something they couldn't hold on to. Afraid of hurting the children, Emily and Noah, if things didn't work out. And yet, neither of them walked away. Because sometimes the things worth holding on to are the very ones that scare us most. The feelings between Daniel and Rachel grew quietly, not loud, not rushed. It didn't arrive through deliberate touches or sweet declarations, but through the smallest things. A gaze that lingered longer than usual, a coffee cup left waiting on the garage step, a soft, "You doing okay today?" paired with eyes that truly meant it. Sometimes Rachel would sit in the corner of the garage, reading company reports amidst the clatter of wrenches and the laughter of children. Daniel worked in silence, but occasionally glanced over at her, wondering when her presence had become such a natural part of the space that once belonged to just him and Emily. One crisp autumn afternoon, Rachel invited Daniel to a charity event her company was hosting. He hesitated. "I'm not really used to that kind of thing," he said, squeezing the oil-stained rag in his hand. "You don't have to be," she smiled. "You just have to be yourself." Daniel went, for her. He wore the new shirt Emily picked out for him. "Blue looks good on you, Dad," she'd said. Inside the elegant hall, he felt out of place. But every time he looked for Rachel, she was there, a gentle gaze anchoring him amid the sea of suits and formal smiles. But differences can only stay hidden for so long. When a group of people approached Rachel, partners, colleagues, people from her world, Daniel started to shrink. They spoke of markets, investments, and vacations he'd never imagined. He smiled politely, stepping back once. Then again. Rachel noticed. On the car ride home, she turned to him. "You were quiet tonight?" Daniel stared out the window. "I just kept thinking, we're from two different worlds." "We're two people, not two worlds," Rachel said, softly but firmly. "You deserve someone who knows how to dress for fancy events, who can talk shop with other CEOs, not someone worried about tracking grease into the room." She placed her hand gently on his. "I don't need someone who knows fine wines. I need someone who knows how to fix my son's bike when he thinks his whole world is falling apart." Daniel turned to her, and in her eyes, for the first time, he saw something he hadn't dared believe. She was choosing him, fully aware of the gaps, the contrasts, the barriers. If anything brought Daniel and Rachel closer than their own conversations, it was Noah and Emily. The two children seemed to understand each other in the smallest, most effortless ways, as if the loneliness in each of them had quietly found a match. Emily had grown used to playing dolls alone, reading stories out loud to herself, and sitting by the window for hours in silence. Noah was withdrawn, often staring off as if dreaming of a world adults couldn't enter. But together, they breathed easier, like they were finally allowed to exhale after months of holding it in. They drew pictures, raced bikes around the yard, and chased fireflies on warm summer evenings. The sound of their laughter filled the backyard behind the garage, a sound neither Daniel nor Rachel had heard in their homes for far too long. Daniel started noticing how often Emily mentioned Noah in her stories. "Dad, Noah says he wants to be a mechanical engineer someday." Or, "Noah helped me fix my bike chain today." Rachel noticed it too. Noah had begun to share more about his day, about the games they played, and about Mr. Daniel, with a tone no longer guarded. For the first time in months, she saw confidence in her son's voice when talking about his world. One afternoon, Daniel stood in the garage, wiping his hands after fixing a customer's car. Emily and Noah sat under a tree, building a race car from scrap wood pieces. Rachel walked over, holding 2 glasses of cold lemonade. "They really do get along," she said, watching the kids from a distance. "Yeah," Daniel nodded. "Watching them? I think if us adults could simplify things the way kids do, life might be a whole lot easier." Rachel chuckled. "Kids don't ask what your dad does for a living or whether you live in a mansion. They just want someone who'll sit down and play." Daniel glanced at her. "And sometimes, adults need that too." They stood side by side in silence, listening to the peals of laughter echoing from the yard. In that moment, there were no class differences, no burdens of past hurt. Only 2 people watching 2 children mend something far bigger than themselves. The connection between Daniel and Rachel wasn't forged through grand gestures, but through the unconditional love they both had for their children. And how those children were gently teaching them to open their hearts again. Because sometimes, love doesn't begin with a look between 2 adults. It begins with the sound of 2 children laughing under the fading light of day in a simple backyard filled with healing. It didn't happen like in the movies. There were no sudden realizations, no dramatic declarations. For Daniel and Rachel, love had grown quietly, like roots sinking deep into the soil, unseen but incredibly strong. After months of shared moments, silent glances, and raising Emily and Noah together, they didn't need to say it out loud. They both knew it was time. And in truth, it was the children who saw it first. One afternoon, as Rachel dropped by the garage with a batch of muffins, Emily climbed into her lap and whispered, "Miss Rachel, if you became my stepmom, could I call you Mom?" Rachel froze for a second. Her heart skipped a beat. Then, gently, she wrapped her arms around the little girl. "You can call me whatever makes you feel the most loved." Moments later, Noah tugged Daniel aside, face unusually serious. "Mr. Daniel, I don't know if you notice, but my mom smiles different when she's with you. I've never seen her like that before." Daniel didn't respond right away. But that night, sleep didn't come easily. He stared at his quiet little home, listened to Emily's steady breathing, and thought about the woman who had walked into his life so gently, yet changed everything. Not with flash or noise, but with patience, honesty, and something that felt a lot like family. The next morning was Saturday. Clear skies, soft sun, and the crisp breath of early autumn in the air. Daniel woke earlier than usual. He tidied the garage, rearranged his workbench, and reached into an old drawer to pull out a small blue box he'd been saving for weeks, waiting for just the right moment. When Rachel arrived, Noah and Emily were playing outside. Daniel invited her into the garage, the very place where it had all started. "I have something to say," he began, his voice steady but hands slightly trembling as he held the box. Rachel looked at him, eyes soft, slightly puzzled. "What is it?" Daniel took a breath and opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring, no diamonds, no flair. Just a ring he'd crafted with his own hands over several quiet nights, each etching carved with care, engraved with delicate words. "For the quiet kind of love." "I don't have anything extravagant to offer," he said slowly. "But I have a home, a heart, and two hands always ready to fix what's broken, even the fragile things. I don't know what the future holds, but if you're willing, we could walk it together. No promises of perfection, just promises to keep trying." Rachel was silent, just for a moment. Then she nodded, her eyes shimmering. "Yes, I want that." Right then, as if on cue, Emily and Noah burst into the garage, grinning from ear to ear. "Told you!" Noah shouted. "Now I have two big brothers," Emily yelled, leaping into Rachel's arms. In a garage filled with oil stains and laughter, Daniel knew. He didn't need a fancy restaurant or a grand stage. This, right here, was the most beautiful moment of his life. A proposal, a family, a new beginning. Married life wasn't a fairy tale, but for Daniel and Rachel, it felt like a gentle melody, warm, quiet, and deeply real. They didn't move into a mansion or embrace luxury. Instead, Rachel moved into Daniel and Emily's modest home, transforming it into a cozy space filled with laughter, the smell of muffins, and the familiar hum of tools from the garage. Rachel chose to cut back her hours at the company. After years of boardrooms and endless meetings, she craved something she once thought was a luxury: morning school runs, afternoon story times with Emily, and quiet dinners around a small kitchen table. "Work will always be there," she told Daniel. "But Emily, Noah, and Olivia won't be little forever." Olivia. The name arrived like a gift. About a year after the wedding, Rachel announced she was pregnant. Daniel stood silent for a long moment, then wrapped her in his arms like he was holding his entire world. Even though he had already been a father to Emily and a guiding presence for Noah, the idea of a child born from their shared beginning stirred something deeper. When Olivia was born, she had Rachel's eyes, but Daniel's firm little grip. The whole family gathered around her, and Emily declared, "So, I'm a big sister now?" earning a roomful of laughter. At the same time, Daniel expanded the repair shop, not just to take on more customers, but because he wanted to offer opportunities to struggling kids in the town. He launched a free apprenticeship program. Every afternoon, a few teenagers would show up to learn. Some had dropped out of school, others were simply lost. Daniel didn't just teach them engines, he taught them patience, discipline, and hope. Rachel supported him, providing tools, helping with long-term planning, and sometimes just standing back, watching him do what he loved with that quiet, proud smile. Still, even with a house full of love, challenges weren't absent. Rachel was still a CEO and sometimes had to travel. Daniel had the garage to run. The kids needed rides. Olivia had sleepless nights. There were days they barely saw each other, passing like shadows, weary and wordless. They argued over forgotten school pickups, unwashed baby bottles, or just exhaustion. But after every fight, they'd find each other again, sit close, hold hands, and laugh. Because they understood, what mattered wasn't avoiding conflict, it was learning to grow through it, together. One late night, with the children asleep, Rachel rested her head on Daniel's shoulder in the backyard. "Do you ever think, if I hadn't gone out looking for Noah that day, if he hadn't stopped by your garage?" "We'd never have met," Daniel finished for her. "Yeah," Rachel smiled. "It all started because of one loose scooter chain." Daniel nodded, eyes distant and soft. "And 10 years later, we have a whole family." Under the moonlight, they sat in stillness, wrapped in quiet gratitude. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was whole, and the journey was still unfolding. 10 years had passed since Rachel and Daniel first met, all because of Noah's broken bike. Time didn't fade the memories. It only made them richer. Emily was now a third-year engineering student at a top university. The little girl who once played with bolts in her father's garage could now design complex mechanical systems. But every holiday she returned home, sat next to her dad and Noah in the old shop, as if she'd never left. Noah had become a certified mechanical engineer and worked at Rachel's company. Yet every weekend he pulled on an old T-shirt and helped Daniel mentor young apprentices in the shop's free training program. "He teaches them just like you taught me," Daniel once told Rachel, watching Noah smile at a 14-year-old boy learning how to change a spark plug. With patience, with kindness, with the belief that everyone deserves a chance. Olivia, now 8, was the sunshine of the house. Bright, curious, and endlessly talkative, she had Rachel's eyes and Daniel's questions. Every day she made the family laugh with her whimsical thoughts and innocent wonder. Rachel and Daniel had become something of a local legend, not because of wealth or status, but because of their bond, their sincerity, and the way they built their lives around love. They didn't live a perfect life, but they made others believe in the beauty of ordinary happiness, the kind found in morning routines, shared dinners, and knowing someone always has your back. Daniel still fixed cars every day, but more than that, he mended spirits, rebuilt confidence, and passed on lessons that mattered far beyond the garage. Rachel still ran her company, but her heart had grown wider. She started a foundation to support single mothers and underprivileged students in town, a way to give back for the second chance life had given her. One autumn afternoon, the family gathered in the backyard, golden light brushing Daniel's graying hair. "Remember the day Noah first came to our shop?" Emily asked, helping Olivia braid her hair. "That old bike, the squeaky bell." Daniel chuckled. "I remember. One of the most important bells of my life." Rachel squeezed his hand, her eyes full of unspoken gratitude. Everything began with a broken bike and continued through unconditional kindness. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, Daniel and Rachel found themselves in the garage, the same place where one small act of kindness had quietly set a lifetime in motion. The old wooden sign still hung on the wall, stained with engine oil and decorated with faded doodles Emily had drawn years ago. The concrete floor beneath them had worn down over the years, but it held more memories than they could ever count. "I still remember that day so clearly," Rachel said, resting her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Noah was crying while pedaling, and I followed him until he stopped right here." Daniel nodded. "I remember the look in his eyes, lost. And I remember feeling like I had to do something, not just fix the bike." They sat in silence for a while, saying nothing more, because nothing needed to be said. They both knew everything they had now started from that one small moment when a mechanic reached out to help a stranger's child. Daniel looked around the garage. This place had become more than a repair shop. It had become a place where hearts were mended, where pain turned into purpose, and broken beginnings led to beautiful new stories. "I think we often underestimate the power of one kind act," Daniel said softly. "One man kneeling to fix a child's bike and ending up rebuilding a family." Rachel smiled, her eyes misty. "Kindness doesn't just fix a bike, it rebuilds lives." Outside, the night was still. But inside that humble garage, a legacy was still quietly growing. Steady, strong, and true, like the people who built it. Life isn't always easy. There will always be challenges, losses, and unexpected turns. But sometimes it takes just one small moment, a kind gesture, a hand offered at the right time, to completely change the course of a life. Daniel was never trying to be a hero. He was just an ordinary man with a heart big enough to listen, to care, and to never turn away from someone in need. And that alone became something extraordinary. Their story didn't have magic. It had humanity. And sometimes that's the only magic we truly need. All from a broken bike and one open heart.